Joe Roberts is affectionately called the Skid Row CEO. It's hard to imagine sleeping under the Georgia Viaduct, hungry, homeless, totally lost on drugs, abandoned by society, and struggling just to survive. To many of the people, the verdict was, this guy's going to die soon because he is totally lost. But not many people believed in the spirit of the soul and the determination of Joe Roberts. How many times did he say to himself, is this as good as it gets? Because something happened to the lost Joe Roberts. He found his inner self and said, I can't live like this any longer. And so he took a courageous decision to turn from his dark and dangerous past and make a brand new life for himself. My friend for many, many years, Joe Roberts. What did he become? A great speaker around the world. Started sharing his story, and his audience loved his courage and were ready to give him a second life. He became one of Canada's top professional speakers with standing ovations and encouragement from coast to coast to coast. He's authored 5 best-selling books on his life. In fact, he turned his life totally around and became a much in-demand speaker. But that wasn't enough for Joe. He decided to raise money and awareness for youth homelessness. And he took a supermarket buggy and walked across the country with the buggy 9,064 kilometers from coast to coast, arriving at BC Place with a full police escort, a pipe band, and a thunderous applause from his many fans who showed up to applaud his grueling journey and conquest of Canada. How do I know this? Because he asked me to MC his victory and final steps to Vancouver Place. He's been recognized by the government of Canada with his push in the change. He's been recognized by the government of Canada with his push in change was a statement of courage and determination. Please welcome my guest and my good friend, and soon to be your good friend, Joe Roberts. Joe, good to have you.
Thanks, Peter. That's very kind. Yeah, it's great to be here. It's good to be on your program.
Now, we did run across one picture that I'm pretty sure our audience today may never have seen of you. It's when you were a bit of a ragamuffin, I call him, which is a nice, pleasant way of saying. And this is what you looked like when you were under the Georgia Viaduct.
Yes, sir. That's circa 1991. That's it's funny. I look at that picture, and that was me. I lived in the downtown east side of Vancouver. I was one of those guys you'd see holding a sign at the corner of Main and Terminal, or at one of the off ramps at First, or pushing a shopping cart collecting cans and bottles. Didn't have a lot of hope or a lot of future. Was going through a lot of, it's funny, when COVID hit last year, the pandemic, I remember finding myself in very familiar emotional territory, being afraid and feeling uncertainty, because that was my life for over a decade.
So what caused you, how did you make that decision? Because that's a pretty major decision, that you were going to go to the Georgia Viaduct.
Yeah, well, look, my story is, Peter, like so many stories of kids who end up making poor choices and ended up on the street. I was born and raised in a little town north of Toronto called Midland. Had a great upbringing for the first 8 years of my life. I had a mom and a dad that was just really awesome. My father was a beautiful man. He was a man who spoke possibility into my life. He used to say things like, I love you, you can do and be anything. And for the first 8 years, everything was great. Unfortunately, my father passed away very young, at 35 years old, and I was 8. My mom now had this massive responsibility to raise 3 kids, ages 5, 8, and 11. And so she wasn't a working professional. She was a stay-at-home mom. And so she remarried quick. And the man who came into the home next was a violent, abusive alcoholic. And so I had 2 early childhood traumas in my life, losing my dad, and then, dealing with violence and emotional abuse at a young age. And so, I really began asking the question, where do I fit into this world? And I remember feeling anxious. I remember feeling, just a lot of fear. And so at a very young age, I started using drugs at 9. By the time I was 15, I couldn't get along at home, and I left home. At 16, I dropped out of school. At 17, I was getting in trouble with the legal system. And at 19, I thought it was a good decision to leave that little town in Ontario and come to Vancouver. It was 1986, in fact. Expo was on. And I thought, I'll come out here and get a job. And I had no idea, Peter. I remember getting off the bus station back in those days was on Georgia Street, right across from the Sandman. And I remember getting off, and I went down. There was a little park there, and I remember the sun was coming up over Expo, and I was excited. Like Vancouver was going to be my town. And little did I know that within just a few months, I'd end up living underneath that bridge. And for the next several years, I was that lost kid that you'd see wandering around in front of in front of the art museum or hanging out on Granville Street, but eventually, down on East Hastings. And for years, my life progressively got worse as I got deeper and deeper into mental health issues and struggles with addiction. So the good news with my story is it ended well. My mom came out and rescued me, but something happened to me when I was on the street, Peter. I met a man who was a complete stranger, on a park bench one day. And I remember him saying to me, "Joe, there's more to you than you can see." He saw my possibility, my potential. I think, Peter, great parents, great leaders, great managers, they don't look at the world the way it is, but how the world could be. And, this last year with the pandemic and all the challenges, we go into a probability mindset. It's hard for us to see hope. It's hard for us to see innovation. It's hard for us to access those creative parts of our mind. And when I was in that state back there, I couldn't see that potential. But he said to me, even though I was wearing dirty clothes and matted hair and black dirty fingers, he said, "Joe, there's more to you than you can see. And if you were to get a second chance, you could do amazing things with your life."
Did you ask him what he saw in you?
No, I was just almost taken aback. It's kind of like when that manager pulls you into the office and says, "Hey, you're doing a really good job," but doesn't explain what you're really doing well. You feel good about it, but I really didn't. But I understand now. I totally understand now. What he was speaking to was my potential, not what was on the surface. Great coaches and managers extract out of their people not what their people are showing the world, but what those leaders know they can get out of that individual or that team. And that's what stretching is all about. And that's why I think in a lot of ways what's gone on in the last years, it isn't necessarily bad. We've been thrust into uninvited adversity, and it's caused us to grow. And it's ultimately, when this is, when all the dust settles, we're going to look at ourselves and say, we are bigger than that. We survived that. We are stronger because of that. And I think that's what Gus, his name was Gus, I think that's what Gus was talking to. But it was interesting because for the first time in my life, someone other than my mom or dad spoke to my potential.
How many years were you in this state? Let's call it the Georgia Viaduct state.
Yeah, I would say off and on. I had insecure housing for about a decade. Now, sometimes, Peter, I'd have an SRO, a single room occupancy, and sometimes I might have been paying rent to sleep on a couch or something. But the last 3 to 5 years were really rough. That was, I was deep into mental health challenges and substance use challenges. And really, housing wasn't a priority. Using drugs was. And interestingly, once I was able to deal with those issues, my life took off. When mom came out, when I finally called mom, I went into a Salvation Army soup kitchen. I connected with some folks there. And, there's so many organizations, but, that was one of those organizations that was always there for me, loved me where I was at. And they helped me connect with my mom. I went back home. I got into drug treatment program. Then I went back to school. And in less than 3 years, I graduated with honors. And so I went from this dirty, disheveled East Hastings drug addict to, graduating on the dean's list. And so Gus was right. There was more in me, but at the time I couldn't see that on my own. I needed people to help guide me and move me forward.
What is the most difficult thing about giving up drugs? And when do you know you've been a success at it?
I think it's a day-to-day thing. It's I don't think you arrive. I think that one, there's the abstinence from, there's the sobriety, if you will, but then there's the deeper work on self. So I want to suggest that what's happening right now with the pandemic, a lot of people are feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And the antecedents, what's caused that is going to go away. We're going to hit that in the next couple of months. Some of that's going to go away. But if we don't deal with the trauma and the stuff that happened to us, that's when that's when other problems can crop up in our lives. And so I've been fortunate enough to work with, inside the recovery community and work with psychologists and friends to really unpack some of those early childhood traumas, losing my father, the emotional and physical abuse as a child, the early drug use and different things that happen along the way. But honestly, there's no arriving. I mean, my resume reads well, Peter. I've got awards, but I can have a bad day. I can have a day where I'm despondent or depressed, and I don't want to engage in the world. And what I have to do in those situations
is, have a bad day?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's no arriving. I spend a lot of years doing things the wrong way, and so I have a predisposition to depression. And if I'm busy and I'm doing the right things to manage my energy health, everything is great. But there are still days when, I can get low and I want to disengage. I want to isolate. It's been difficult during the pandemic because I thrive being around people. And so I've had to find creative and different ways to make and keep those connections. But this misnomer that you become the Canadian version of the American dream and it's all over, that's not true. No amount of success can guarantee future happiness. You create that happiness a day at a time.
So how do you control these urges, Joe?
Well, the urges are gone. Okay, the urges are gone to actually pick up and use drug. The urges to want to escape aren't. So
what are you escaping from, though?
Well, fear, uncertainty, stress, overwhelm, right? The types of things that push in, like we don't do well as human beings with uncertainty, and we've had way more than our share of uncertainty in the last year. And that's why you see people kind of coming out sideways. You see people who work in the service industry are they're really taking it on the chin, whether you're a person serving coffee at Starbucks or you're a police officer. People are just, they've been really tested. And so, we're seeing that spike in stress, that spike in overwhelm, that spike in and doing things it's only normal and natural when we feel those things to want to escape in using alcohol, maybe drinking a little bit more wine or hitting the bar, hitting the beer, or eating or binge watching Netflix or isolation. So these things are normal for us to do as human beings when we feel fear, uncertainty, and doubt, right? And so knowing that having that awareness and then having a toolkit of things to do when I start to feel that way. And I really believe big in sort of mentorship and connecting with other people to hold me account.
So does it get easier as you get older, or are those urges still crop up now and again?
No, not so much, but I have replaced a lot of that life with new things, with passions and purpose. Simon Sinek talks about finding your why. And I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I found that why. I left the business world, the media development company that we started in 98. I left that in 2003 just to pursue a career in speaking. And today, what gets me out of bed is doing work that's meaningful and fulfilling. And so what I do is I tap into my inspiration, I get into action, and that helps me overcome the situational and psychological roadblocks that get in the way. And so as long as I stay busy and connected to a purpose that has, resonating meaning in my life, I'm able to deal with the outside and inside climates that would otherwise derail me. It's that whole thing, idle time, right? Keep yourself busy and do things. And the other thing that's really big is managing your energy, getting the right sleep, taking care of yourself, eating properly, exercising. I'm a huge exercise advocate because there's just so many benefits to the body and brain.
Is this let's say this desire that comes upon you once in a while? Do you think it's there for life? And does it happen to other people who've been on drugs and gone sideways in their life and then corrected themselves?
I don't know.
It never really goes away.
Say that again, Peter.
It's something that never really goes away. I mean, the urge might not be there today, but it might be there in 3 months, and you got to control that feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like having for me, I feel like it could be a trap door. And if I'm not careful and if I'm not vigilant, but it's like anything in life. If you take risks in business and you take, unwarranted risks, eventually something bad is going to happen. Right. And so you want to shore up. You want to shore up your risks as much as possible. How other people approach it I can't really speak to that. I can just say that, what I needed to do was 1, be around a community of like-minded people, 2, be accountable, and 3, deal with the underlying issues that actually led to me wanting to escape into alcohol and drugs. And as long as I do that, I maintain it. It's kind of like, having diabetes. If you know what to do to maintain it, you can carry on a relatively normal life. And I don't pay too much heed to, this thing in my brain that might say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to do this? When that happens, I just think, yeah, but no thanks, because I've got decades behind me now. Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot easier. It's different, obviously, in those early stages for somebody trying to put together a 30 days sobriety or, their first year. It's different.
Other than sleeping under the Georgia Viaduct, other than being an international wonderful speaker, other than conquering drugs, which you've done, I think perhaps you might be well known for of this crazy idea. I thought when I first heard it, when you first told me about it, that you were going to push a shopping buggy from one end of Canada, ending up in Vancouver. How did that come about? And how challenging was that for you?
That was intense. How it came about is I was on an airplane ride with my business partner at the time, Dr. Sean Richardson, and Sean and I were talking about what we can do to better protect young people from entering homelessness. Something that's obviously a great passion of mine. It's my story. And so we were talking about how do you engage Canadians? How do you inspire Canadians? And Sean said, why don't you push a shopping cart across Canada? I remember turning to him and said, why don't this was on an airplane ride to Calgary. And I said, I turned to him and I said, why don't you push a shopping cart across Canada? At the time, I was a non-athlete, but then we started taking a look at how Canadians engage. And obviously, when I was 13, I met Terry Fox. Like, he ran through Barrie, and and both of us share a friendship with Rick Hansen. And so we were thinking that model is very Canadian. How could we borrow from these awesome Canadian heroes and legends and use that same model to engage Canadians? And Sean said, well, shopping cart represents homelessness. It's a symbol of chronic homelessness. It's part of your story, and it would give you an opportunity to engage with Canadians. So that's what we did. We built a custom shopping cart, and we got a whole bunch of really great folks together. And over the course of 17 months, 24 kilometers every single day, I got up and I pushed that shopping cart from St. John's right here into Vancouver. And of course, Peter, you were at our closing ceremony at the Vancouver Public Library. Along the way, we had 574 events. We brought together great partners like the police departments, the OPP, the RCMP, the Vancouver Police. We brought together the United Association of Pipe Fitters, and it was just fantastic. We engaged over 100,000 kids, but more importantly, we raised the conversation. Now, from the perspective of it being hard, it was extremely difficult on me mentally and emotionally. And probably one of the greatest things that I learned from that is what happens when we push ourselves too far. On the surface, it looked great. If you followed us on social media or you saw some of the videos, but what was going on inside the campaign is we were having a lot of problems with burnout and stress. And so when, things again happened this time last year, I thought, I've seen this before. I know what this looks like. And but yes, it was an extraordinary, it was probably one of the hardest things I did, was to push a shopping cart 9,000 kilometers across Canada. When it was done, I remember it was either the province or CBC, somebody asked me, they said, so what are you going to do next? And I said, nothing. I'm going to put my feet up for a couple of months.
What do you think draws the general public to the people like you that do the shopping cart from one end of the country to other, to the Rick Hansons who takes his wheelchair around the world, and other overcomers, the Terry Fox who never made his journey complete, but they're still talking about him today. What it is about the courage, the guts, the determination, the willpower it must cause you to have every single day. What is it that draws people to that?
Well, I think at a conscious or even unconscious level, they realize how hard it is. And what it does is, it's not about me pushing a shopping cart or Rick or Terry. It's the fact that we all share and can tap into the resiliency of the human spirit. You see, inside the push for change, and for me, it's guys like Rick Hansen and Terry Fox, inside their stories is a resonating possibility mindset. What do we admire about these Canadian legends? Is that they took on something so big and so challenging because they wanted to create change in the world. And we admire that. When we connect to purpose, we find another gear. And what comes out of that is what Gus told me on that park bench 25 years ago, that there is more inside each and every one of us than we can see. My greatest asset is adversity. My greatest asset is that I had to go through some really challenging stuff. In the beginning, it was uninvited. Today, I invite it. I do things that are difficult. I do endurance athlete sport. I do Ironmans. I walked across Canada because I intuitively understand that there really is more. Just like Gus told me, there's more inside each and every one of us. And I think people are drawn to that because we all would love to be able to do those things that maybe are a little scary, or we aspire to wanting to create a difference in the world. And I think that draws people in.
Well, my friend, you have influenced thousands, probably tens of thousands of Canadians who have seen you do the impossible, as they've seen Rick Hansen and other people, and they admire you and they respect you, and caused you and helped you be the successful man you are and the great speaker you are. And I am grateful to be your friend. Thank you for being on this program, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure.